If you believe that your customers love you so much that they want to get 3 messages a day, you are drunk and you should go home and take a nap, because that's not the case.
Welcome to CXWise, where we share wisdom, insights, stories, and expertise from the world of customer experience. I'm your host, Nate Bennett, and you're about to hear real-world experiences and practical advice that will elevate your CX game, no matter your title, no matter your industry. So, without further ado, let's get wise. Today, we've got a guest who doesn't just talk CX, he lives it. He's known as in the industry as the CX guy, and for good reason. Joining us today is Eli Weiss. With over a decade of experience building and scaling early-stage startups, Eli has mastered the art of balancing customer experience and customer retention for some of the most beloved D2C brands out there. Think Jones Road Beauty, Olipop, and many, many more. But Eli's journey didn't stop there. He consulted with over 100 brands, helping them fine-tune their retention strategies while sprinkling a little magic into their CX. And now Eli's taken his talents to the tech world, where he's the VP of Customer Retention at Yotpo, shaping the future of e-commerce marketing and retention with his signature flair for making customers feel seen, heard, and wowed. Welcome to the show, Eli. How are you, my friend?
What an intro. I love that. I love that it's like Get Wise with Eli Weiss. Was this show made for me or what?
It was kind of ooh, CX Wise? Wait a minute. We should have thought of that. That's going to be our new t-shirts. That's our new logo.
Love it.
Man.
It's good to see you.
Hey,
Thank you.
Eli, one of the things we like to do on CX Wise is to define our terms right from the start. So I always love to ask each one of our guests what their definition of customer experience is. So Eli, what does customer experience mean to you?
I think customer experience is kind of the reemergence of caring about the customer. I think customer support has been this kind of old reactive, pull out the old laptop, respond when you wish. And customer experience is really looking holistically at the customer journey and understanding, like, what did I promise and can I deliver on that? And I think the bar is very low. It has been forever. I think as customers, we very rarely are we wowed, if at all, kind of delivered any sort of reasonable experience. So customer experience is really just putting a seat at the table for the customer. I think we've seen, even in the last few years, we've seen a reemergence of these like chief experience officers and kind of like real leadership positions at the table at very large brands, and customer experience is just that.
What do you think it takes to really wow you? I've heard you talk about yourself as being a terrible customer. So what does it take to wow you?
So it's been like I've been wowed once in the last few years, and the one time that I've been wowed was actually like more than a company should do and is probably not fiscally responsible. I think wowing a customer is kind of like the old adage of breaking the script of something that you didn't necessarily expect. But I think the flip of that is the bar is very low. So if you reach out to a company, you say, hey, I've got a wedding in a couple of days and I ordered this a week ago and it still hasn't shipped, 95% of brands won't even respond to you within the 3 days, and you'll get to the wedding and you still won't have what you have, and Zappos will jump on and say, no, we'll expedite it and you'll get it tomorrow. And realistically, when you zoom out, that should be the bare minimum, right? When you order something and the ETA is X and you're almost at X and it's not there and you gave yourself 3 days of a buffer, I think we've kind of, we put Zappos, and Zappos is the greatest of all time, but we put that on a pedestal. You know, that being said, it doesn't take a lot to wow most customers because the bar is so low. I think I'm uniquely privileged to have seen so many terrible and great experiences. So I think I'm a little bit more of a challenge to wow. But most recently, I ordered a container of matcha from a company, and an hour later, they said, thanks so much for ordering the vanilla matcha. Just curious, would you be down to try the strawberry one? And we'd love to send that to you for free. And what about a whisk? Like, we just know you definitely should have a whisk to get the best experience. And I was just floored. I mean, like, that doesn't make sense. I spent $30 on a container. You're sending me an extra like $45, $50 of merchandise. And granted, it doesn't cost them that much. Yeah. And my first question was, do you do this for everyone? Because that's crazy. And they were like, well, no, you're special. I still don't know the answer. If they do this for everyone or it's at random, but we think about surprise and delight. And I think most brands think about this like huge strategy around the cards they should send and hiring people to write the cards and what should we write in the cards and what should the box say and how big and sophisticated should the box be versus just taking 10 customers every day of your 1,000 and saying like, how can I just blow their minds? And it doesn't take a lot to build these like superheroes of a brand by just breaking the script, but the bar is very low.
So what lessons, if I'm in the B2B space, what lessons can I learn from that? Because, direct to consumer, that's a very like hands-on, where we have perhaps a little bit easier of a relationship that we can establish by doing gestures just like that. But if I'm in the B2B space, how do I create those wow moments for larger brands?
I think B2B suffers from a very similar situation that the bar is very low, right? When you jump into a product purchase journey, your consideration phase on B2B is often much longer. Your contract is much larger. The cost to do business, the risk is higher. And I think from a B2B brand, like the status quo is get oversold by a seller that doesn't really understand what you're looking for. Get pushed into a contract that's longer than you want, get upsold and cross-sold things you don't need, get promised products that don't exist, and then see us kind of like cheekily walking into the room and saying like, I don't know what they told you, but I'm here to try to help. That's the status quo. So again, it's like the bar is so low that I think in today's day and age, I think most B2B or SaaS companies can do the bare minimum and still blow people's minds. Like when I scroll through Twitter and see what people are saying, like, oh my God, you wouldn't believe the implementation manager stayed up till 9 p.m. to like get me onboarded. And then you ask like two more questions. Okay, when? Well, I should have been onboarded 3 weeks ago and blah, blah. Like there's and the bar is so low. And I think that's something that I've taken from direct to consumer to B2B is you don't have to do anything crazy to blow people's minds in terms of service and experience, but it all has to do with what you promised. And I think over promising is the thing that breaks everyone. Yeah. And we can get in detail on why brands over promise, because I think sometimes it's super simple, sometimes it's a little bit more confusing, but it sounds very simple, but the promise and what you deliver is so often ridiculously skewed.
So let's get into it now. Why is that?
Well, I think for the most part, KPIs just live in different houses. Sales team will have a very aggressive number to hit. Growth teams on direct consumer brands will have a very aggressive number to hit. You're telling them like, hey, your KPI is I need to bring in 10,000 new customers this month with a max acquisition cost of $35. Now, on average, if it generally would cost me $45 and Facebook is kind of turning the algorithm and now it's 60, the only way to break through that is to do crazy shit. The only way to break through that is to say something like, this is the best product you've ever tried, to try some AI slop of some influencer saying a story about a Saudi sheikh that used this to change their life. Like we enter this territory of chaos because you have a unfeasible goal and you say, like, let me be mega creative and let me promise things that don't necessarily exist in the way most people would think of it. And it's somebody else's problem because you as a growth marketer or as a seller are infrequently held responsible to the downside of what happens after that. So in our case, like on the Olipop side, we saw this pretty often, that depending on which ad somebody came in from, their LTV was skewed. And again, like whatever motion I have post sale, I can solve for a missold experience. And I think we see that over and over, but the KPIs on the growth side or on the sales side is sell more stuff. KPIs on the retention side is keep this person for longer. And quite often they're at odds if you're squeezed too tight. And there's not much you can do. Somebody sold a product. They come on, they're like, this is not at all what you told me I'm getting. As a CSM, as an implementation manager, what can you really do? Not much. Like you can run to product and be like, please build this, but then are you messing up a roadmap for 5,000 other customers? But brands very often there's no cohesiveness in between growth and retention. There's just at odds.
You mentioned being a Yotpo hater to working for Yotpo. Can you talk to us about that shift? How did that happen?
So, good question. TLDR, like the long story short, uh, I have worked at a bunch of direct to consumer brands. I have churned Yotpo at almost all of them. I felt like it was expensive for what it was, for what the offer was. I felt like I didn't really get the support I wanted, and I held that as baggage. Um, at some point in my most recent job, I was excited to kind of really mess around and do something entirely different than I ever have. And when you become the CX person and that's all you do, you kind of like say, okay, what about if I switch from one company I know well, beverage, to beauty, where I don't know anything about mascara? Would that bring me the challenge I'm excited about? Turns out 6 months later, I know everything about mascara and full coverage and foundation and what have you. And now it's that challenge is no longer there. I had a newsletter that became pretty popular. Yotpo sponsors my newsletter. They talk about SMS. I had no idea they do SMS. They talk about retention platform. I had no idea they do it. Long story short, I connected with the CEO and he says, would you ever join SaaS? And I said, absolutely not. And he said, like, I think you're an entrepreneur without the risk tolerance. Like, you like building things and solving problems, but you don't really like, you like a paycheck. And I said, it's a very astute observation. And the thought was, like, you have sat on the other side. You probably need to delete some tweets before you take a job here. But you have a deep understanding in like what we've done wrong over the last 14 years and what we've done. And you can probably bring the pessimism from the outside to the inside and keep us in check, but also like you'll have the ability to jump around, and that's an offer I wasn't able to refuse. I didn't jump in for the money. I didn't jump in for the fame. This is the hardest job I've ever done. But it's the most meaningful job I've ever done because I think I finally feel like I can bring real value.
Like the leadership of your CEO to say like, hey, there's opposition over there. How about we take that opposition and like bring them within, like bring them in the house, because they're pointing out things that actually it makes sense. Like that's a great quality to have as a leader, as a business leader.
I mean, I don't say this.
For that.
Yeah, I don't say this lightly. Tomer, our CEO, is a good friend of mine, but arguably a top 5 in terms of like the most inspiring people I've met. And I think he's, came out of college, built a massive SaaS business, like one of the biggest in Shopify. You don't really get training for that. And you make mistakes as you build. But to your point, the humility of a leader to take a step back and say, these are the things we've done well. Here's where we failed miserably. Here's where we can learn from is I can't say I've met a few, more than 1 or 2 leaders that can actually do that with the humility, because again, like the thing that makes you an entrepreneur is that like ego and drive and like crazy.
Brazen and bold. Yeah.
Yes.
I'm always interested about in my guests' origins of becoming CX superheroes. Like where did that sensibility, where did the eye for it, the feel for it, where did that come from? I know you are one of 10 kids, right? And I wonder if there's something in growing up in that environment that honed your CX sensibilities.
So I can sit on a podcast and give you an eloquent answer, but the real answer is some childhood trauma that made me just, I think I had a stronger antenna than most in terms of like feeling things. I think I've been blessed with much higher EQ than IQ. Like I said, a family of 10, my older brother is like, a lawyer at one of the best firms in the country. And he's like IQ 1,000. And I view myself as the other extreme. I don't do well on tests. I'm not great at math. Got a little touch of ADHD, but I am very, very high EQ. And I think that gave me in the early days, I would see a conversation and kind of view it as a ping pong and see where the ball would land. And I think that's like a superpower. If I had one superpower in the world, that's the one I had, is like I was deeply able to understand the volley of a conversation. And when you understand like the give and take of a conversation, you understand quickly what somebody needs in order to feel like they won. And some of it like pans out in negotiation, but as somebody that wasn't a big negotiator, it panned out as like, okay, I know right at the beginning what I want to hear. I know what you want to hear. Like, let's accelerate through this and get you there. And on the CX side, that just proved to be as a 15-year-old calling a company and saying like, hey, I saved $150 to buy this pair of shoes. I got it and it doesn't look new, and you don't want to take it back. And you kind of argue back and forth. And I say, hey, here's like, this is weird. I'm 15, but this is what you need to tell me to get me to be done. Just apologize. Just say like, you're so sorry, and stop saying like, we are so sorry for, like, stop reading the script, put the paper away. Just apologize. Just say like, you deeply feel that this was not fun for me. And as a 15-year-old, I'm like, I'm probably a little crazy. But then when I jumped into the first CX job with no experience, like I was like, that's my hypothesis. People want to be deeply understood, apologized, even if you don't have to take accountability to apologize for something. You don't have to say it's my fault that your mom has whatever and you want a refund. That's not your fault. And even if you can't give the refund, you can say, I'm so sorry to hear that your mom was diagnosed with whatever. And as much as I'd love to refund you, that's not in my power. But I will stay in touch with you every week to let you know when your order is going to ship. And that worked every single time. Like there was never a customer I couldn't fix in the way of like, they left feeling better than they came. I've had customers I had to fire. You're out, you're done, time out. I've had customers that I had to like figure out a way to refund, that there was never a customer I couldn't level with. And I think over time I learned like, how can I leverage that in a retention role? And turns out there are parts of retention that challenged me. I think EQ is, the earlier you learn about your superpower, the better positioned you are to use that in your career. And I think most people don't get there, unfortunately.
Yeah, 1,000% agree. You touched a little bit on CFM and retention. So let me ask you, how important is customer feedback management in shaping a retention strategy? And I'm wondering if you have any examples where it led to big CX improvements.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's core, like deeply understanding trends and feedback is core. I think the difference between experience and support is exactly that, right? Support is like, where's my order? Here's your tracking number. Experience is like, there's a consistent trend with X, Y, and Z. And how can I take that to different parts of the team to solve it from a product level? How can I take it and solve it from a communication level? For us, across a few of the brands I've worked with, we learned very quickly that the promise we're making on shipping is not at all in accordance with what we're delivering on shipping. And by making one little switch on the copy on the shipping email, you solve thousands of complaints. And I've spoken to brands that are, massive, do a couple $100 million of revenue a year, and they learn from reviews information or returns information, things about the product that you can sell a product for 10 years and never know. Unfortunately, or fortunately, I guess fortunately, all of this data is pretty accessible if you work with the right people or the right tools. And I think that's the beauty of this, is like, we're in an age where you can kind of climb through this information and synthesize it in a matter of minutes. And the question becomes like, do you want to act on it, or do you just want to cry when the same thing happens next week? So.
Yeah, I mean, the information is there to be collected, but I think then the challenge becomes, what are the insights that I glean from that? Mm-hmm. And how do I implement those insights to shape my CX improvement? And I think a lot of brands struggle with that. There's no shortage of the data, but there's a shortage of understanding of how that data can be implemented to improve, it seems.
100%.
You were talking a little bit ago about the consideration phase in B2B. And I want to go back to talk about marketing a little bit. How do marketing strategies impact customer experience? What's that link between a brand's messaging and its CX? Because you're just kind of touching on it just a moment ago too.
Something that's interesting to me, being on both sides of the market, is platforms that have a good brand recognition and brand name end up having less complaints because people gaslight themselves to like the product. So give you an example. Out of the software world, Apple, don't hear many people complaining about Apple unless it's like an in vogue kind of like, hey, I hate the battery. But like the little quirks and things about Apple or Tesla, or like, like it's either you love Tesla and everything they stand for, or you hate Tesla. There's less like nitpicky complaints around X versus Y. And I think that's brand. So on the SaaS side, the platforms that are widely used and loved, it's almost like how dare you to complain about them? And the ones that are kind of like well hated, everyone is kind of like, it's the cool thing to pick on. And you'll see that even on the Twitter X world, or in like communities. Like there are a couple of platforms that everyone whines about, and you just need to get off that list. But I think it's a 1000% correlated. Like when you're on like the greatest platform, how dare you complain? And vice versa. So I think brand and marketing, like all those things drive you to a place where your sales cycles are shorter, your consideration phase is shorter, your CX feedback is less. Like as brand gets better and better and better, you just see all of that shrink. Like the cool platforms just have consistent inbound. They're not running any ads because someone's mother told somebody else that this is the tool to use for X. And it goes against every B2B kind of like stereotypical rule. And I'm a huge believer in the value of brand and the flip side of that.
Right. I'm wondering if you can think of any like blind spots in marketing and retention, like the things that brands swear are best practices but might drive them crazy as actual customers.
This is the one that gets me in the most trouble. And before we started, I said, "Hey Nate, I'm really tired, and this can be the greatest thing or the worst thing. So we'll find out." But I know. I think the biggest kind of like divisive topic in retention is how much messaging do I send? How many times do I ping my customer? And I think there's no space for any like middle ground here, because it's either like you are sending way too many messages, or you could never text your best customers enough. Like everyone loves to have a hot take here. And I think as a customer, I love using my mom as an example, because she's just your average shopper that isn't very tech savvy, that doesn't know everything about your ESP. She feels like she gets too many emails. And she feels the same way if it's from a company like Children's Place that she's buying from, or Gap, versus Wayfair. She doesn't have a brand that she loves so much that she wants to get a message from twice a day. That is a farce. If you believe that your customers love you so much that they want to get 3 messages a day, you are drunk, and you should go home and take a nap, because that's not the case. And again, when you say, yeah, but I message them and they still don't unsubscribe, I mean, give me a break. I have plenty of emails that I don't unsubscribe until I throw it in spam. And you're over time, you'll see your deliverability go to shit. You'll see your kind of like spam complaint rate go up. But like, if you as a marketer think, no, it's just us, we're biased because we're marketers. No, my mom has no idea how the sausage is made and she still hates it. And you can ask your friend or your mom or your whoever in your life that isn't super in the weeds, and they will tell you the same thing. And that's like my biggest hot take is there's a huge dissonance between like what we are okay with as consumers and what we do as marketers. And I think it comes from the basic misunderstanding that segmentation is hard. And I think that's just like, that's 2016 level thinking. And I think in today's day and age, you can segment pretty easily, whether or not you're in a consolidated platform that has email, SMS, reviews, loyalty all in one, or whether you are just using an email provider. Pretty much every email provider in the space, you can feed in profiles, whether you're a massive brand with a CDP or not. Like, these are all excuses. Any ESP in the world today can segment based on things you can pull in from profiles. And if you're on Shopify, for sure, you can just basically pull in profiles from Shopify. Did this person purchase? Did they not purchase? Did they buy 1 time? Did they buy 7 times? Do they keep buying the same product? Do they buy a different product? And you need to leave $0 on the table in order to segment decently. And again, I think we're heading to a world where you will be paying based on the messages you send. You should be paying for what you send. And when you get to that point, it's basically the question is, do you want to pay more? Or if somebody tells you, hey, I know exactly who you should be sending to, would you say no to that?
we're kind of touching on this, but you're somebody who's switched from building DTC brands to working on the tech side. I wonder what's one thing you wish like tech companies understood better about the human side of CX and retention.
I'll give you both of the sides here. I think on the tech side, I wish SaaS vendors understood what the appropriate method to get to customers is. And I think there's a lot of just like send 1,000 messages until you break through the noise and get like a leave me alone message. And deeply understanding, like something that SaaS providers can better understand is when is the time that somebody would be willing to change? What are the things they need to hear in order to be willing to change? What is scary about a migration and how can I solve for that? And I think like vendors are getting better at this, but it's truly understanding your customers and not just throwing a bunch of information at them. And the other thing I think we're seeing in this realm is SaaS companies hiring people from the brand side to say like, hey, you've been in this space, help us better understand it. We've, on the Yotpo side, we've hired people in CS that came from brand side. Hey, you're doing this all day, sending emails and SMS, help our best customers send better emails and SMS, versus hiring a bunch of like people that have done CS at a whatever IT company that are now jumping in and trying to help people do e-com better. So I think there's that. On the other side, I think the thing that brand people need to learn better is how to be decent human beings to SaaS vendors. I think if there's anything you can learn is how fluid this industry is. So for example, like I jump into SaaS, I'm now competing with some of my friends that were on the SaaS side, right? Like I have previously used a Yotpo competitor and now I'm competing with them and they were my friends. And then you suddenly see like now you're excommunicated. And I'm like, that the same speed I went from brand to SaaS, I can switch right back. And guess whose tool I'm never going to use? You're on the list. I mean, what? And this happens every single day. Like somebody will get annoyed about a price increase and say like, if you don't fix this for me, I'm going to tell everyone. What are we in 6th grade? And the last thing I'll say is on the contract thing, like people sign a contract and pricing stayed the same. Everything stayed the same. There's no breach of contract on the SaaS side. And they will say, I am out. And you don't have the ability to do that on your lease unless you pay. Don't have the ability to do that on your car unless you pay penalties. There's no other place in the world where you can say, I have a 2-year lease in my apartment. Guess what? I'm out. You can't do that on your car. But for some reason on the SaaS side, people are like, well, I want to leave. Did you not sign the contract? What do you think the contract is for? It's not to lock you in. It's because that's how SaaS companies build models on support, right? Like the cost to serve. If I get the largest brand in e-com tomorrow, I need to hire people to support that. I build out a model based on that. So when you leave early because you decided to, I think there's like a level of entitlement that I've never left a contract on the brand side because I signed the contract and my word is worth something. But I think that's something I've seen is like the empathy that's expected from brand to SaaS is not at all what they give back, but also that's not at all what they deliver to their customers.
No, that's sort of shocking and disappointing to hear as another brand person. You talked about making hard decisions before. You talked about putting customers first in your work, and you also talked about having to fire customers. And I'm wondering, what are the hardest decisions you ever had to make where you had to choose between what was best for the business versus what was best for the customer?
That's a great question. I think I'll say a few things. A lot of those decisions on like firing a customer have not been difficult for me for 2 reasons. First of all, because I've always had the moral clarity on like, if you want to support 5,000 more customers, well, the worst way to do that is putting your team under the bus. Like, I think for the greater good of all your other customers, you need to create a space where that's not acceptable. Firing customers is something I've done twice in my career, and I've probably interfaced a few 100,000 customers. I've probably answered a few 100,000 tickets myself. And I think I can count 2 times I did it, and both times where the level of abuse was just unacceptable. And if I wouldn't accept it for my family, I wouldn't accept it for my team. And for the business, I've always kind of had the clarity. And I've always done it. The second point is I've always done it with as much grace as I possibly can. So I explained very clearly what happened, and I explained very clearly why we can't support them. And I said, like, I'm always open to talking if you feel like I've made the wrong decision, but you will not reach out to my team and you will not place another order because it's going to get canceled. Funny enough, the last time I did that, 3 weeks later, I got an email from the same person saying, I need to let you know that I was actually in the hospital in rehab for a few weeks, and I was messaging you from the hospital, and I have had like a miserable year, and my family's not in touch with me. I'm stuck in the hospital by myself, and I just feel like I was a little bit obsessive and felt like you guys owed me more than you did, and I've had a few weeks to think about it, and I sincerely apologize. And then the end of the email was like, by the way, Eli, I think we could have been real good friends in real life. And I'm like, Rebecca, I don't know about that. But apology accepted.
Bridge too far, but apology accepted.
Yeah. And I think to me, and being one of the 2 people I fired as, customers, that really, really, really stuck with me. That whether or not you make the right decision or the wrong decision, there's always a larger story.
Man. I appreciate you sharing all that. One of the things that I've loved about our conversation is the candor. It's really refreshing, and I really appreciate it.
Don't know how to do it otherwise. I've tried. I've tried.
That's why you're so valuable.
Thank you.
So you've been at the forefront of consulting for well over 100 brands. If there's one universal truth about customers that you've learned across all industries, what's that truth?
This is an easy one. Nobody talks to their customers enough. Nobody across tech, across consumer, across any industry I've spoken to, everyone guesses who their customers are, what their customers think, what their customers want. Everyone has a bias. Everyone guesses. It's extremely rare for you to find a company that has taken the time to speak to 30 customers on the phone or better understand why somebody chose you over anyone else. Nobody's talking to customers. Like we talk at them, we send them a lot of emails, but nobody talks to them to better understand, like, what have we done wrong? What can we do better? What can we do different? Why did you choose us? What problem are we solving for you? Right?
And I just want you to keep going. That's so great and incredibly important. And as you're talking, I'm thinking about all the things that I can internalize for myself and my own job day to day. So listen, man, you've been extraordinarily kind with your time. Thank you so much for your wisdom, insights, your stories, your expertise. Eli, you've made us all a little CX wiser today. Thank you very much for joining us. I really appreciate it, man.
Thank you for having me.